Let me just go to Laoise de Brún, who's the CEO of the Countess. And actually, she did a wonderful speech the other day in the RDS and explained very clearly, in simple terms, the language around the legislation for freedom or for hate speech and the implications of that. Laoise, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Yeah, I do feel that quite often this concept that these children could somehow be criminalised, those children that do have sex, engage in sexual activity prior to the age of consent, I mean, that is just not the case.
There is one case, I've just read one case in Kildare currently at the moment where a judge has said there's a child or a 16-year-old in state care, a boy, and he's had consensual sex with a girl of the same age, and he's in court now for statutory rape, but the judge said, you know, we need to do something with the law because my hands are tied.
Because, that would be highly unusual because usually there's discretion given to the DPP in those cases. I mean, we even have as well, if it does go to court, the Romeo and Juliet defence, whereby it isn't seen as rape because it's
the
consensual and exactly. Yeah. So it's not that there's someone in authority or an older figure involved. There isn't a power relation as such. So it doesn't come under different, statutory provision. It is just seen as, well, these are younger children and this has happened. So I would need to know more about the facts of that particular case to comment on that case. But generally, it is not the case in general that children who engage in sexual activity prior to the age of consent would be criminalised. So, I'd really question why there's a push to lower the age of consent.
Well, I think isn't the reason behind it? I mean, the real reason behind it is, but you have the government last year prescribing and giving free contraception to children over the age of 16 or teenagers over the age of 16. Ireland is one of only 2 countries in the EU that has an age of consent of 17. The majority of countries in the EU have an age of 16 or lower. Sadly, 10 of them have an age of consent of 14, which is ridiculous if you ask me. And I'm with you, Laoise. You know me as well as everybody else knows me. I'm not the type of person who wants a very progressive liberal society. I'm quite conservative in my views. I want to protect children. But I suppose their argument, and I'm just giving you their argument, is we need to come into line with Europe, that we're a bit of an outlier.
Yes, but I mean, I feel like with so many of these arguments, there's a sense that, we need to be the cool kids. We want to be the cool kids. Like, is it better to be like other countries, like in France, where, children are far more sexually active, much, much younger, and maybe they didn't have as many unwanted pregnancies because they had the full availability of contraceptives or whatever, but I mean, is that something we should aspire to?
I think the rate of unwanted pregnancies has dropped dramatically in this country over the last 20 years. I mean, we don't see, I mean, if you go back 20 years ago, there was a litany of 18-year-olds and 17-year-olds having children. But nowadays, we don't really see that. Thankfully, with the availability of contraception and education as well, and children, when I say children, teenagers being more responsible, I think we're not seeing that as much.
Yes, and I mean, that has to be a good thing. And I just think, if you take a step back and look at this sort of, I don't know, philosophically, like, how is it a good thing for more younger children, and they are children legally, to be having sex? Well,
no, it's not a good thing. You're right. No, by the way, can I just point out, I've said at the start of the show, I disagree with lowering the age of consent, but I'm giving the alternate arguments. But when I see, 16 across Europe, and I see that the average age over the last 20 years has dropped from 17 to 16 for losing your virginity, it means that the average teenager is having their first intimate relationship somewhere between 15 and 17 anyway. So what I'm saying is, you can't on one hand turn around and say to a 16-year-old girl, you can go to a GP without your parents' consent and be prescribed the pill at 16 years of age, or any contraception, the bar or whatever it happens to be at 16 years of age. You can go and get the morning after pill at 16. You can get condoms at 16. You can buy contraception, or you can get contraception free of charge, courtesy of the state at 16. But you're not allowed to use any of it. So that doesn't even make sense.
But one of them is kind of a public health issue. So we're sort of saying, well, we're not going to make you pay, basically, if you do go ahead and have sex. But at the same time, the other is more of a kind of social signifying law, really, because, I mean, as I said earlier, I don't think children are being thrown in jail for breaking this law. So it is more like, I think we should have the confidence as a nation to say, actually, do you know what? We would prefer if if children did wait until they were 17. That we should have the confidence to be able to say that in the public sphere, and legislators should have the confidence to be able to basically stand their ground and say this is what most people in Ireland think. You know, we don't have to have a race to the bottom. It is not progressive to encourage 14-year-olds to have sex with each other. I don't see what good is served from that, frankly.
No, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And I certainly don't agree with, the idea, by the way, that maybe teenagers think about their age when they're having sex. I don't think they do. I always believe that age, like for drinking, like for everything else, it's a guideline more so than a law. Well, except when it comes to driving, of course, you must be 18 years of age to drive a car on your own. But when it comes to, say, the legal age of consent, for most, it's just a guideline. I mean, is there anybody that actually gets that opportunity, be you a guy or a girl at 16 or 17 years of age, and that night out and you have that first opportunity of intimacy? Is there anybody that actually goes, well, actually, no, it's not my birthday till next week, so I can't really do this? I don't think anyone does that, do they?
No, and I think you're right there insofar as it's to do with your social circle, what the peer group are doing, your particular background, your particular upbringing. Like, it's a whole myriad of very nuanced and complex things that are at play there.
But the point I'm making is, if you reduced it 1 year from 17 to 16, do you really believe that a lot more people are suddenly going to risk having sex? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. And I don't necessarily think it would necessarily encourage the ones who wouldn't have to suddenly, have sex a year earlier either. But I think it's okay to have these kind of signifying social standards, that we can get behind. I don't think we need to look over our shoulders and go, oh, what are the cool kids doing? What's the rest of Europe doing? I think it's fine for us to say, do you know what, actually, this is what we're doing. We're doing it this way. Okay, so
you're okay with Ireland kind of being that kind of slightly conservative outlier when it comes to the age of consent?
Yes, because particularly because it's not necessarily conservatism, it's actually child safeguarding. And the two things get confused all the time on a whole myriad of issues, social issues in this country currently. If you don't want a 12-year-old reading a sexually explicit book in the public library, you're now told that you're kind of a fuddy-duddy, a conservative, a bigot. It is just basic child safeguarding. It's trying to keep children safer and trying to, look after them and mind them until they are ready and they have sort of the faculties that they need to deconstruct all of this.
Yeah, well, I certainly don't want a 12-year-old reading some of the scruff that I've seen in some of these books that are available for 12-year-olds in public libraries. They should be in an adult section of the public library and all of that nonsense that I've seen online recently. Let me just go to Morris. Stay there, please, Leisha, if you can. Morris, hi, how are you?
Good, thanks. I would actually disagree. I would say that the age of consent should be raised to 18, like in America. Or
it should be raised?
Raised. Like, for instance, I lost my virginity when I was 14 to an older girl. But in my opinion, for instance, you were saying about that case about someone who was 16. From my knowledge, when you're talking about kids doing that, they're the same age and stuff like that. Wouldn't be classified as rape. So,
well, according to the judge, he's left in a quandary because obviously the DPP has brought the case to court, and it's a case of what they call statutory rape. But the judge, sometimes if there's legislation in place, it's not up to the judge.
But if I was the parent of the girl who was 15, I'd be very angry. If I'm being honest, I wouldn't be too angry with the young fella. I know that's biased now, but in relation to, I know I'd probably go off topic now slightly, but it's in relation to this. But in relation to the Magdalene laundries, for instance, the reason why it happened, it happened all over the place, but it didn't happen in my area in Waterford, and I can tell you why. I was talking to a guy, he's still alive now, he's in his 90s. He said to me he knew a few people, even his own sister, that got pregnant. They weren't married and they were 18, 17. But they never ended up because the Magdalene Laundries was in Waterford City. They never ended up there. And the reason why is because even if the young fella who got her pregnant ran away or said it wasn't him, the parents then didn't kick her out. Because what 18-year-old, for instance, has their own house, has a job to pay the bills.
You're talking about mother and baby homes, not Magdalene Laundries.
Yeah. But what I'm saying,
I don't know why Waterford was some sort of exception to the Catholic Church, but however, well, I've never heard of that.
The village where I'm from.
Oh, the village. Why were they not all Catholics or something? Was there not a parish priest there? The reason most parents were shamed into putting their daughters into mother and baby homes was because the local parish priest and the local community would frown upon them at the time.
Yeah, but he was saying to me in his area, people know what goes on in the place, who got robbed or whatever it is. He was saying to me, from his knowledge, no one in the village where I'm from, near Dungarvan, didn't, were left destitute, had to go to laundries. But I'm just saying that, for instance,
I'm not going to disagree with you, Morris. I don't know where you live exactly, but Dungarvan, you said to me, I doubt that there's nobody in Dungarvan in the last 40 years, 50 years has gone to a mother and baby home. I don't know where that fact comes from. Anyway, Morris, you got off on a tangent anyway. You said, anyway, you believe it should be increased to 18. Is that not a step backwards? No?
Maybe, but what I'm saying is that also in relation to education, for instance, people should be saying, like if you had a daughter, for instance, who was, let's say, 16 or whatever, and you didn't want her doing all of that, and you said to her, for instance, I wouldn't use religion, but I would say this: if you want to marry well, let's say, to a guy who's a pile of money or whatever, if you look at Facebook, for instance, I have piles of stuff that I'm not proud of, that's pictures of me doing stuff like drinking too much or whatever it is. And people can look at all that.
Oh, no, I know. Anyway, social media, we're going off into a load of different tangents there, but I understand the point you're making in relation to social media, and I think you should always talk to your children about whatever stuff you're putting up on social media in relation to them. But let me just ask Laoise about that. Laoise, now I've heard people say that we should increase the age of consent to 18. That would be a step backwards, wouldn't it?
Well, it's funny, like in terms of the logic, in insofar as what we were discussing a moment ago, that like, you and I both agree that someone is not going to necessarily wait that year, and they're not going to have sex a year earlier if you nudge it either way to 16 or 17. I mean, the same is true, in this regard. Like it's the same thing. Like I don't think. Sorry, what was the question about? Were you talking about?
Is it a step backwards if we move to 18? Was the question? Yeah, is that a step backwards?
Look, I think that's Sorry, that was my train of thought. That it's not going to make everyone suddenly, wait till they're 18.
No, I don't think so.
I think we need to be somehow mired and grounded in reality. I think 17 is people feel that 17 is you're starting to, you're not quite an adult, like you are at 18, but you're starting to mature, You're going into maybe your leaving cert year, and I think there's a consensus around that may not be very explicit, but there's a kind of agreement in society that at 17, it's a little bit older than 16. Like you're maturing so fast throughout those years.
I know. I've often talked about that to people. Between the age of 15 and 17, there's a massive change, particularly, by the way, in young girls, more so because they mature faster than young boys. But there's a massive change in a human being in those 2 years. It's almost like they go from being a child to being an adult very quickly. We see the changes throughout their life and the milestones of their life, but that age between 15 and 17, that age of maturity, there's an incredible change. And I know because I've got 3 children who are all over the age of 20 now. But Laoise, listen, it's been lovely having you on the show again. And by the way, well done once again on Saturday. I have to say, for a lot of people there, when they listen to you, they got a very good understanding of the implications of the hate speech laws, the way you describe it, from a legal point of view. And I have to say, it was very well explained. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Niall. It was lovely to meet you in real life as well.
Lovely to meet you too. There you go, Laoise de Brún, the CEO of the Countess.